Before I get started, I'd like to say thank you to a few people. First off, Professor Beyer, thank you so much for helping us out. We really can't tell you enough how much Professor Beyer does for us. I mean, we could try and we could try, but there would never be enough words in the language. Also, I'd like to thank Ashley and Riley for giving us the opportunity to share just a few moments of your time. We know that you didn't come here to hear us. You came here for all the other information. And as to that other information, I'd like to point out that my particular presentation actually piggybacks off of a later presenter. Ms. Mary Burdett this afternoon will be presenting about the remedies for breach of fiduciary duty. And so my statement, my talk will actually go hand in hand with hers. And the first question when you read my title is, what is this chasm? What is it? What is he talking about? Well, when I say chasm, I'm talking about a void. I want that image to ring through your mind. And the void that I'm talking about is the void in responsibility for an agent of the trust. Now, when an agent is delegated responsibility under the Texas Property Code, he's given a duty of reasonableness. Whereas if this same task was done by the trustee would be held to a fiduciary standard. So you can see almost immediately that there's a disparity in the duties depending on who is the person who is doing the duty. For instance, the one that most commonly comes up in my mind is the investment advisor. Duties are delegated by the settlor to the trustee. And then the trustee, via the Uniform Prudent Investor Act, has the power to delegate. And when he delegates that power to manage the investment property, he's then giving something that he would have a fiduciary duty, or he's delegating responsibility for which he would have had a fiduciary duty if he was doing the action himself. And so, as I stated only a moment ago, you can see how there's a breakdown in the duties between these two people. So, when I wrote this paper, the reason that I wrote it was in talking to a few practitioners, I found out that there was kind of a question as to what duties were owed by these agents. And so I kind of made it my quest to find out exactly what duties were owed. And in doing this, I found out that it kind of varies by state. In the state of Delaware, for instance, Delaware Statute 3322 would impose the same duties on the agent that are imposed on the fiduciary when they do it himself. Whereas Texas, as I stated a minute ago, is only that duty of reasonableness. So my thoughts on this issue and the substance of my paper is that this works somewhat of an inequity in favor of the agent and at the loss of the beneficiary of the trust. Because at the end of the day, that's the person who's bearing the risk of loss and is most injured if the agent does do something that would constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. So let's talk about what this means for all of us today. As we all know, there are two sides to every story, and so I'm going to try to give you a little insight as to how you can avoid these problems, avoid the right-hand side of the V as a trustee, and what you can do as a litigator if you are faced with this situation where you have an agent of the trust who's done something that would constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. So, as the trustee, the biggest thing that you can do is to do your due diligence. You need to show the court and everyone involved, hey, I did my homework. The dog didn't eat it. What you more or less need to have is something like a personal checklist that just shows that you went through and you did check this person out before you delegated the responsibility that was first delegated to you by the settlor. So if you can show that, then you're probably going to be in good shape. Because as you can see here, the Texas statute avoids liability to any trustee who delegates properly or delegates when a reasonable trustee would have done so. And all of this really comes back to what we call the modern portfolio theory. A lot of you know this. It was part of the reasoning for the Uniform Prudent Investor Act was what happened in investing, and now trust law has kind of caught up to it a little bit. However, what I'm suggesting is that there's another catch-up that needs to happen, and that is that the agent be seen as a co-fiduciary, as I was saying a moment ago. So the things that you can do as the trustee, that personal checklist, and then proof of the follow-through. And then the other thing that you'll need to do, as you'll see in my statements to the litigators, is if this person, if your agent, makes a mistake, it is your responsibility to overlook, to see that they did make a mistake, and to hold them accountable for their mistakes. Part of the duties of the trustee in that same statute is to reasonably oversee the trust or the agents of the trust. And so you do actually have a statutory duty to do that. Now, the other solution is obviously in contract. Anything can be handled by contract. One of the things that you can do is to reflect as, well, make your agency contracts reflect what I think is actually going on. You're actually delegating a fiduciary power, fiduciary discretion. And so when you do this, make it explicit. So when you actually form that agency relationship, make sure that they understand that they don't only owe those duties to you as the trustee and the person who hired them, but also to that beneficiary who's the person who bears the ultimate risk of loss. And also make sure that there is a clear indication of a benefited third party. Again, make sure that they understand that they're not only working for you, but they're working for the trust. So when it comes to on the litigation side, some of the things that you're going to need to be looking at is who is it that you're wanting to get at. If it's the trustee, there's one theory, and that's that statutory duty that we were talking about only a moment ago. And on the other hand, if you're trying to get at the agent, there's a third-party beneficiary, as we were talking about a moment ago, with what trustees can do to avoid liability. Now, in terms of trustee liability, the theory of prudent management. What would a reasonable and prudent manager do? As we said only a moment ago, the first thing you're going to want to look for is a lack of due diligence. If they didn't do their homework, then they are automatically liable for the acts of their agents because they did not do their homework. So the other thing that you're going to look for is, did they catch this breach of fiduciary duty and hold the person accountable? And so if they've done that, then you would have no right of action against them. But what you would want to look for is a failure to do either one of those things. And that would, in fact, give you a cause of action against the trustee. Now, if it's the agent that you are trying to hold accountable, then it gets a little more in-depth in terms of the judicial theory that you're going to want to apply. It's about third-party contract. And in Texas, the standard is clear intent. So the contract, the words of the contract itself must show that you did intend to benefit a third party. And so part of this is signing as trustee. Anytime a trustee signs a document, there's automatically indicated a benefited third party, that beneficiary of the trust. And so my theory is, obviously it's not judicially proven, my theory is mainly an idea and a way to get around what the statute says right this second. Because as it stands, that agent is only responsible for a duty of reasonableness. And we all know that the duties that they are actually performing are duties that would be fiduciary in nature if they were performed by the trustee himself. So by using the law of agency, you can impose that fiduciary duty, and your beneficiary is a third party, obviously a third party to this contract between the trustee and the agent. So the theory would allow this beneficiary to bring suit against the agent for any breach of fiduciary duty. So this is more or less what I brought before you today. I saw a problem in the present way that the language of the statute is written. And what it does is it circumvents the intent of the settlor. Because one of the main purposes of the trust is to give someone the responsibility and someone the benefit. And that with that responsibility comes quite a bit of actual responsibility, that fiduciary responsibility. And what we're trying to do is see that anyone who is exercising fiduciary discretion is held to a fiduciary standard. So some actions for you is either hold them accountable through this new cause of action, or to speak to your local legislators about perhaps changing the way the legislation is at present. Again, thank you all so much for being here. We cannot thank you enough for being here and supporting the Estate Planning and Community Property Journal. Thank you again to Ashley and Professor Beyer. And y'all have a blessed day. Thank you so much. Enjoy your lunch.
All right, thanks, Will. At this time, we are going to break for lunch. This lunch is going to be a working lunch. Professor Beyer will be our next speaker, and he is presenting at 12:40. So if you want to go over to the forum, grab your food. If you can eat really fast, you're more than welcome to stay in there. But please be back here a few minutes before 12:35. You're welcome to bring your food in here and eat. while he gives his presentation. So we will now break. Thank you.